Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Lori, and I'm with LevelSet. I'm joined today by Edward Burton and Valerie Avila with CST Worldwide. Thanks for being with us today. Okay, we're going to reshare that. In the meantime, if you don't know what LevelSet does, we are a construction industry platform. We handle liens and waivers. We deal with contractor profiles. We have payment risk reports, as this shows. And we also have a payment professionals community, which you're actually watching this webinar through right now. What we'll cover today is dealing with escheatment when you have credit balances on your accounts. I know a lot of people don't know what this is or haven't dealt with it. So hopefully you'll find a lot of great information here. We'll tell you how to deal with the credit balances and the unclaimed funds, the basics of dealing with those, and proactive ways to avoid the penalties, extreme audits, and massive cash loss. As I mentioned, we have Eddie Burton and Valerie Avila. Would you guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Ed Burton, CST Worldwide. We've been in the commercial collection business and do a lot of outsourcing programs with a lot of clients, as most everybody in the industry does nowadays. Generically, I was a credit manager for 3 years at General Electric, so I understand that side of the equation, and it's helped me in our industry helping out credit people throughout the country over many years. So I've been a collector, been a bookkeeper, a mail clerk, sales. So I understand that side of the equation as well from our side. So hopefully beneficial in what we're presenting today.
Absolutely.
Valerie, I've been with CST for a little over 3.5 years now. And then I was in the construction industry as a credit analyst for almost 12 years. So this is a pain point that I completely know about and I understand, and sort of the processes and the things that you have to do. So I'm really excited for us to be able to talk about and just give some general knowledge to everybody out there.
Well, thank you again for joining us, and feel free to take it from here.
So the escheatment issue has been a bigger problem for a lot of companies for the last 10, 15 years. Lori had done a survey questionnaire, and there was a number of folks that had no knowledge whatsoever of it. And a lot of people that do have knowledge aren't even utilizing a procedure for it. What we're finding out is that about 10, 12 years ago, there was a particular agency, as a matter of fact, that went to the state of Delaware and said, I think we can bring a lot of money to your table. And so states started becoming more aware of that. And Delaware itself came up and told some people that they thought they could go back infinity. They didn't have to worry about 7 years, 10 years, whatever. They could go back as far as they were. And they specifically asked one company for records going back to 78, which was absurd.
Wow.
So it gets out of control. Nowadays, it's getting a little bit better as far as some continuity across the country. But what they're typically looking for are things that are aged out there at least somewhere in the 5-year range. They're not looking for the last 4 months, 6 months, that type of thing. But if you don't have an escheatment policy and credit balances, what that concerns, if you have credit balances on your books, you should have some standard policy that within your procedure manuals, and that you are following it month in and month out. Because once it does get out there where it's aged, the first thing they're going to do when they come in for an audit is ask for what you have done with regards to these. And if you have nothing, immediately, like most audits, the red flags go up, whistles and bells, and the audits can be just disastrous. We had a client who was involved in an audit because they were providing software to some major corporations, Fortune 100 companies, all public. And if you know of a tax that you're not being charged, then you are supposed to pay that tax to the state of residency. And that's what was happening. Our client was not charging the tax. They didn't think they had to from their state. The ignorance didn't work. State of Texas was getting all this money in to the tune of $2.5 million from various major corporations that were referencing our client's name as to the sale or purchase of product, the tax wasn't paid. So that's what brought the attention of Texas to this particular company. They announced to them that they would be doing an audit. They charged them for the full audit. They had to pay the $2.5 million, our client did, to the state of Texas. Mind you, just told you that they'd already gotten the money from all of these major corporations, but the state of Texas said, no, you got to pay it. Plus you had to pay the audit and you had to pay a penalty to the tune of the total package was $3 million to the client that they were out. Then they were given a certificate that they could go back to the corporations and ask for that money back. Sounds ludicrous to have to go through that process. State then was paid twice, right? I'm in private business. Government gets me aggravated on those kind of things. So I'm like, what can we do to help people? And a lot of companies generically in our end of it have tried to help folks in establishing policies if they didn't already know it. And we use millennials to help us across the board. I love millennials, by the way. But you can notice he said, she said here. Right?
There you go.
Got to come down, get some policies in place that are going to be accepted by the accounting folks. You want to get that passed, get it blessed. And the main thing that you need to do is every 12 months that you are addressing whatever credit balances that you have on the books. If you're making those notations into your system and you're audited later, then at least you have a value that you can keep from having to be penalized. Now, granted, if there's money due and they want it back, you obviously want to give it back to them right away. If they want to put it towards future purchases, that will fly, and it is appropriate because you have companies that will put money out there and they've got it on the books, and they'll simply tell you it's an aggravation for us to be able to bring that back in. Voila. So we're going to have future purchases. We're buying from you on a monthly basis or at least on a quarterly basis, and so we'll use that the next time we purchase from you. Perfectly good and works well. Takes the stress out of the issue. We don't need any more stress. We have enough stress in our world. COVID's created a lot of stress for us. Mm-hmm. With that in mind, what we do is we try to help you bring the puzzle together. We all have the jigsaw puzzles that we've dealt with in the past. And that is one of the things that, how do we fit these things together? Well, we look at the corners, we'll cheat and get those things lined up just right and put them back into order for you. And that's what you need to have help in. If we can create a specific procedural process that you can stay with that's simple enough, generically across the board, if it's through an agency or through your accounting people, whatever source that you need to grab that will help you in doing that kind of a thing, you want to have an approved policy. We specifically are Sarbanes-Oxley approved, and because of that, our auditors are coming in and they're fine-tooth combing and external folks, and it is a headache to go through. We have to go through it every year, and it's a 3-week, 4-week process. Sometimes it lingers on, which they always do. But in today's, if you don't do those things, the example I mentioned earlier could be the nightmare. Obviously, that's a large scenario, but you don't want to put yourself in a position of harm's way. And when you think about it, we had one client that they had a $850,000 credit balance on one company. Well, that can affect your billing, your end of the month, your DSO. Right. Well, that looks great, but when you have to come out of that and clear it, not only is it's going to mess up your DSO, it's going to really bring it in light. The other problem with that is cash flow. So how do you account for it? You don't want to have to get stuck with that kind of thing. So being attentive to them, not letting them get out of hand is extremely important. A new issue that's come up because of COVID is that there's many scenarios where you may have a deposit on hand for jobs that are coming up, that you have merchandise product that you're being in production or delivered, but it can't be placed on the job site yet. They can't get the infrastructure done because of the issues of supply and demand or whatever the scenario is. But you have money that's been on the books for 4 to 5 months now, and your product is sitting in a warehouse waiting to get installed. Now that doesn't sound too bad if it's just 4 or 5 months, but what if it goes into 6 months, a year, or longer? Now you get into an escheatment issue because you have money that's on the books. Ironically, I had a client that is a Fortune 100 company that they said that they have taken the approach that now that they're 18 months into this, they're changing the date of the invoices to be current so it doesn't age which gets them problem because I have checked with CRF, Credit Research Foundation, and a couple of auditors, and their attitude is, no, you don't want to do that kind of thing because it was received, and that's what's going to be determined by the state, is when the money was received is when it's aged, and don't try to change the books.
Right.
All right. So be cautious of those kind of things. You want to check with your own internal auditors to find out what you should be and should not be doing. So just be careful of that. Those are oddball scenarios, but they will come up because of COVID. The COVID issues are from A to Z. We don't know yet how much that's going to affect us long term. It's going to be 10 years before we know the full effect of this whole scenario once we're through with it. We're not through with it, as we well know, but it has changed the environment in many, many ways and how business is operating. Legal issues have just been a fiasco. Certain states are telling us that we can't pursue because of COVID still. We've seen some lightening up in those, like New York specifically was a great state in May to get back to business. Some of them we can bring in some attachments. We still are not able to go into trials in many states. So you're stagnant there. You have to watch out for your statute of limitations if you get into that level. So it's not only just escheatment, but there's a lot of things that this brings into play. Time is money. We all know that. That's every day, all day, and it never will change in credit. And we have to be attentive to what's going on in the marketplace. And escheatment is one of those areas that has become a major concern. And with the states recognizing that there's so much money out there in it, they're fast and quick to come after that money. So they want to get it into their coffers. I'll caution you there with the states. Yes, we have to be obliging with them, but they report this money as a liability. But I know for the fact the state of Texas, if they had to come up with the money that's on that liability, they don't have it. They're using it for other things.
Of course.
Same on them, right?
That's right.
They're no different than any other state. I don't know of a state that can say that it's truly fluid cash flow. And get off the soapbox, right? At the end of the day, bottom line is, I think that your customer deserves to get the money back more than the state deserves to get it back. Put the money where it belongs, right? So anything in that regard, I would be cautious to do it in a proper way. But at the same time, do it the right way that's going to keep the PR and the loyalty of your customers with you. They appreciate the fact that you're trying to watch out for their money as well.
I had a question pop in really quick. What if the customer has gone out of business? What would you do with the funds then?
In that particular instance, you're supposed to give that money to the state. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of like someone dies, and then money is given to the state. Everybody's heard that scenario where you can contact the state and find out if there's any money under your name, right? So it's been willed to you, or it's been turned over to you, or somebody shows that they sent a check to you and you never cashed it, or whatever, a payroll check, The same thing with this kind of thing. If somebody that goes out of business, that's the death of the organization, right? So if there's any money out there that you have with regards to that, the effective rate, what you're supposed to do the proper way is to turn it over to the state of residency. That's your company's residency.
Another question came up. Do you happen to have a sample policy that a company could use to follow the escheatment guidelines?
Yep, we do. We can have
Awesome.
that be available. You could contact Valerie or myself.
I can email it out.
Yeah.
That's no problem. Send Lori a message and then I'll send it to you via email.
Yeah.
Thank you. I got a couple more questions that just popped up. What governing or does each state have its own policy? And if so, what governing state would you go by?
They'll have their own policy, but they're becoming more generic. And as I mentioned earlier, the rule of thumb now seems to be that they're looking at things that are in the 5-year range. They're not looking for something that's been out there just the last few months, and specifically during COVID, knowing that you have so many contracts that are job sites that are being put on hold. Shortages are everywhere. I mean, today, I've heard this the last 3 weeks, and I just saw another blog today about the Port of Los Angeles has unbelievable number of freighters that are sitting out that they can't even bring into port. Then number one, they don't have the workers to unload them. And then secondly, even if they do unload them, they don't have the trucks to put them on to send them out. It's truly the pandemic has become just a phenomenal scenario. Right. Small stuff. We went to the grocery store the other day to get a breast of chicken. So we don't barbecue chicken. Could not find breast of chicken packaged. Had to go to the meat counter, and the butcher had to cut breast of chickens out, and they were double the price they were a month and a half ago. The fires in California on the West Coast, they're having to plow under a lot of the vegetation that was going to be produced for all of us to send across country, right? We're losing out on food is an issue. All of that area, the chips things that are going on, so phenomenal. An auto car thing the other day, I'm driving in the car and they're talking about this specific car that was an SUV that's very popular now. And the guy was trying to look for it. He's calling in to tell the auto guy, said, well, I found one. And he didn't say what the manufacturer's suggested retail price was, but he said the dealer price was $10,000 added on. Oh, by the way, there's an additional $5,000 for the chip. So $15,000. If it's a $25,000 manufacturer suggested retail, it just became a $40,000 car. Mm-hmm. If the craziness of across the board of what the pandemic has created in the way of shortages, we had a lot of people that didn't want to go back to work. I saw a thing from a 26-year-old said, the government should pay me my money because I'm tired of working. Well, no, we don't want to get back to work. But we have a lot of jobs out there. Let's say there's 10 million plus jobs available. Today we see there's 351,000 that have applied first time for unemployment. It's up from what they thought it was going to be, 320. So there's a lot of people that are still out there out of work, 11 million. But that's a lot less than it was last year, 26 million, right? So we've got a lot of people back to work. But lumber mills, when all of this hit last year, all the lumberjacks left, all the mills shut down. Bringing those people back has been a real chore. Finding the people that can fill the slots across the board. Medical is huge. I mean, everywhere nurses are shortages. Doctors have overstaffed, are overworked. There's not a thing that the pandemic hasn't touched. I made a comment publicly back a year ago. I said, I hope this is something that they're only going to be talking about in history books for 10, 15 years. No, it's going to be 100 years they're going to be talking about this. Mm-hmm. We've not seen anything like this in our lifetimes. The last time anything happened like this was the beginning of the 1900s. This is historic.
Right.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
So Cindy, thanks for joining. But Cindy had a great question. It looks like there's a lot of questions in there. And one of them was from Cindy, what if you don't turn monies over? So what's the repercussion to that?
If you don't turn money over and the state comes and gets indication, and that you have to take the roll of the dice that they're going to find out about it. And if they do come in and audit you, and as I said earlier, One of the ways that they can wind up auditing you is if you don't collect a tax that you're supposed to collect from specifically a public company. Public companies have an obligation, just as the private companies, everybody does, to report to a state that any tax that's not collected that they know should be collected. And they are supposed to in turn pay that money. Anybody, if you don't have a tax that you know is, or you're not being taxed, and you know it's supposed to be done in Texas or Mississippi or wherever, then you're supposed to pay that tax. That immediately becomes a red flag to the state. If it happens just one time, they're probably not going to pick it up. 2 times, not going to pick it up. But in the case I alluded to earlier, there were multiple major corporations sending in large sums of money referencing the same supplier. And that's what the red flag that brought them up. And then the audit is done, and you have to pay for them to come to your state and do the audit, but whether it be Texas, whether it be Minnesota, California, whoever, whatever state it may be. And when they come, you have to pay for their housing, their meals, their airfare across the board. And if they're there 4 weeks and they send 3 people, multiply it out. And then on top of that, whatever penalties they put in. So the repercussions of not doing it when you know it's there is a major issue. And if you start putting it to miscellaneous income, that's really going to be a nasty, because they'll go back as far as they can. And once they figure that out, that's the bad part. Taking the roll of dice of what do you want to play that game? I don't want to play it.
Brian that asked a question. He said, I've been a credit manager for over 13 years, and I've never been told to do this. Who is, I mean, where are you supposed to hear about this thing? Whose job is it actually, I guess, to handle this sort of thing?
Well, there's people like Credit Research Foundation that and NACM that will provide that. Level Set would have that information. These things are becoming more and more needy to know, because most states are grabbing into it. And what do we know about government? Again, where they find out they can pick up revenue, then they'll do it. Again, you just have to be cognizant of what's out there. The escheatment's been in place for a long time, but it's a matter of the states being cognizant that there's so much of that money that's on books with major corporations, and they have found how much they can pick up. And if you're a small entity, they probably won't come after you. But that's not to say that somewhere down the road, you may have some issue that brings it to their attention, whatever state you're dealing in, and then you're in trouble. The public thing I mentioned earlier, a public company like an Exxon or an IBM, they have an escheatment policy with the stock exchange entities. And if that's one of the things for dislisting a company.
Well, and then another thing, Lori, another thing to throw in there is the fact that there is, like Eddie said, like Level Set, we have Thea's book. So Thea's book touches a little bit on all these things, where it's just a good guide, where it's not a black and white of this is how you're supposed to do everything, but it at least gives you some guidelines, things to look into, things that you don't know about. How do I do this? How do I do that? How do I expand our whole department? How do we make things easier? So it's just little things like that to educate.
And along that line, I read part of that on Thea's book, she made reference to the fact that, she didn't know all of this stuff, but she started reading about it, started upscaling and find out, here it is, this is coming up. And the question earlier, never heard about this. She hadn't heard of that years ago. We hadn't heard of it years ago, but you hear about it and then you start spreading the message, let me help you. And that's reason that people like Thea, like Level Set, like ourselves, are out there to try to help out, to keep people out of trouble. Our whole philosophy has been that we are an extension, and I think most everybody I just mentioned has the same opinion. We're an extension of your office, and if we can help you stay out of trouble, then you're going to be in better light with us down the road. And that's the whole purpose. We're all working for you, and that's the reality of it.
Thank you guys for bringing up Thea. For anybody that doesn't know what they're referring to, this is Thea Dudley. She is referred to as the Credit Overlord, and this is her book. The links are right there, but if you just want to shoot me a message, I can go ahead and get you the link. Right now, if you download the first 11 pages of the book, we'll send you out a free copy of it if you want it. It's just the basics of everything. Like they said, it talks about the escheatment, it talks about liens, basic credit needs and policies. It's just a nice overall book that can share that information that they were talking about. So I appreciate you guys bringing that up.
You bet. You bet. Any other?
It looks like we got a couple times is how long can I keep the balance on the account?
Yeah. Again, the rule of thumb that I've been told is the 5 years. But if you're holding it 5 years, then unfortunately what you're going to do is create even more in depth of an audit. If you've had an audit, you know that what they look for as things that you're trying to hide. And if you have something that shows up that's a warning sign, then they want to see 10 items of it. They want to go into 50 items of it. And that's going to extend your audit, your cost, and then your exposure, unfortunately. So in the event that it goes past 12 months, then my recommendation is that you offer to send a check if you haven't already offered to send a check. What we typically do is say, would you like to use this for future purchases? That is completely acceptable and agreed by states.
But make a note.
If you put the note in your system, you got it covered. But if that note is 14, 18, 20 months old, you didn't follow the policy. It has to be within 12-month period. Every 12 months, you got to make sure you cover that base. And if it gets into that second year, then you need to start thinking about sending it, at least partial back. They want to keep some of it on your books, agree to that, whatever. But keeping it on the books for 4 or 5 years is going to be a red flag to any audit.
I like that you mentioned that 12-month thing. I didn't even know that you had to do it every 12 months myself.
Yeah, unfortunately, but that's, again, it's just kind of like the guidelines. We've got to pay our taxes every year too. So
right. Does anyone else have any more questions? I know we kind of got into the Q&A a little early. If you want to go ahead and...
I saw your comment, but it's good that you guys already have that policy in place because it's something that not everybody does. So good, kudos for you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was surprised when we did that poll that Eddie had mentioned early on about who knew about the escheatment and all that. I mean, I would say it's close to 80% really didn't know about it or know how to deal with it. So.
Yeah. And if you're a middle-sized or smaller company, you're probably not been approached by it because the state hadn't come after you. It's the larger companies. What they're looking for is the big bucks.
Right.
If you have repetitive issues, then you could be a middle-sized or a small company that's going to be called to their attention. And that's how, like I said earlier, it was, indirectly how it was brought to the state's attention. It had nothing to do with the one-on-one with that company. That company wasn't even in the state of Texas. But because of the reporting that came in and the payments that came in that all alluded to that client is what raised the red flag. And if you have that kind of a scenario going on, then that's what's going to be the issue. You got to watch out for it.
And then Renee, thank you for joining as well, Continental. He asked, is there a minimum amount that is used to gauge when the money should be sent back to the state? I'll just tell you from my personal, but Eddie knows actual answers. I would try to give back small amounts. I try to give back large amounts, but it's always funny. It would always seem harder to give money back than it would be to collect money back sometimes. But Absolutely. That was just my scenario as an analyst sometimes. But yeah. Eddie has an actual answer for it.
No, that's true. People don't, it's an aggravation for me to bring the money back in. I've got to make 3 or 4 entries to get that back in. Just leave it on your books. Okay, we'll do that. But no, there is no minimum that you can consider that you should just take to miscellaneous or to leave it there for indefinite. You need to have an actual attempt to try to resolve it every 12 months. And if you have that policy in place and follow it, then you should be okay for any audits that were to come in later. Questionnaires. Don't want to have a large penalty. Don't want to get a stigma about us.
Well, and if they're auditing you for that, they might decide to audit you for something else at the same time.
Right. You never know.
Heard that happen.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, any kind of approach like that kind of thing can be detrimental to your company. It gets out on the internet, And then you've got all kinds of questions and answers, and, loss of customer base. Well, nobody wants to get into that end of it. And that's what this whole thing's about, is just be informative, try to help people out. I hope it is. Hope it does.
Just because you worry about your past dues doesn't mean that you don't have to worry about your past credit balances. They're items that need to be resolved as well. You don't want anything that's out there and you're aging that far anyway. So it's always like, how do I clean this up from the right side to the left? And escheatment is just part of the process.
I mentioned earlier about the $850,000. If you had $850,000 in one account that you had to give back, think of your total AR. What is that going to do to upper management's bonuses at the end of when you do that?
It's gonna hurt.
So internally, not externally, but internally, you're going to have some issues.
Yeah, definitely.
That's another reason why to take care of that stuff.
Don't see that we have any other questions in there. Do you want to go on to the next slide, Valerie? I think the next one was okay, go ahead and go one more. We did go ahead and put a certificate ability put together for you on this. If you check your email right after this webinar ends, there will actually be a little quiz. It just has 3 short questions. And if you answer them correctly, you'll get a certificate. So you can just share it with your boss, share it with your socials, just so that they know you took an escheatment class and now you know what you're dealing with. And I want to thank you, Eddie and Valerie, for taking time out and talking about this. I know it was a hot issue, and hopefully people got some good information, and we look forward to getting that sample policy from you so we can share that with everybody as well.
Thank you. Yeah, we're happy to participate. We appreciate the invite, and we appreciate Level Set.
Well, thank you.
Everyone. Have a great day. Be safe.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.